Good morning and welcome to day 3 of our devotions for adults. Those of you that have stayed with us and have been a part of this, we so appreciate you participating and enjoying. Now, we hope you're enjoying this. If you're brand new to this, we want you to know you can go back and click on the previous ones and pull those up and still see the devotional process that we've been as we've worked our way through the book of John. So welcome and still praying for our nation, still praying for our president, still praying for all of those governors and local officials who are making incredible decisions to try to do the best we can to get through this crisis. But remember, it's God that's going to get us through this crisis. And our prayer for His help and His strength and wisdom, both to them and to us, is the thing we do the most. Pray. Just pray, and let God have His way. But as we've said earlier, during this time, let's let God do something very special in us. And a part of that comes by spending time in His Word. This morning I'm going to be in John chapter 1, and we're going to read verse 40 for a little passage, and then we're going to see what God's saying to us. Would you join me? Verse 40 says this: Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah," that is the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which is translated Peter. Jesus called Philip and Nathanael next. Verse 43. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth? Can anything good come from there?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see, Philip." Well, this is interesting. We see some things. We first of all hear the word disciple, and we see Jesus developing his disciples. What does that mean to us? Well, the word disciple means learner. It's an interesting form of learning. It's a learning that includes really 3 different manifestations. One is a follower, an imitator. It means that I follow the person that I want to be like and learn from, and I imitate what they do. I learn from watching, I learn from listening, but I learn from following and seeing and being a part. So it's that following that I become an imitator of the person. The second phase of discipleship is to listen and learn. I hear what they say and I learn. I ask questions. I try to comprehend. I try to put together an understanding of why they do what they do. And the third part is a participation. It's me as a participant doing what they do while under their direction. So if I don't get it right, they can provide correction. They can help me learn it until I can do it without oversight. That's the process of discipleship. First, an imitator. Second, a learner. And third, a practicer under the covering of another one. So in that, these disciples were following Jesus. Jesus used a tried and true learning method that we now call the community learning method. He didn't just take one and lead them out to learn, but he built a community of learners. Educators teach us that community learning is one of the best forms of learning that they've ever found. It's both faster and produces better and more increased knowledge, better learning if they do it in community. So Jesus didn't just take them one at a time and keep them separate. He brought them into community, and they learned together better than they would have learned individually. They kind of bounced off each other, threw ideas at each other, sometimes disagreed with each other. I like to tell the story of a time when I was in a person's house, and I could hear in the background this grinding sound. It went on for hours. I finally asked the person, "What is that noise I keep hearing?" They said, "Oh, that's my rock polisher." I said, "How do you polish rocks?" He said, "Well, you take all these rocks that have the potential to be pretty, you put them in this one device, put the lid on it, and put it on a machine that turns it over and over and over and over. And as when you first do it, the sound is really annoying. But after a while, it begins to change and becomes a nice, quiet hum. And once you know the sound is the sound you're looking for, you take it off, pull the lid off, pour out the rocks, and they're all nice and shiny. I thought about that. Jesus calls it the church. It's when he puts us all in the church. We've all got our rough edges and we're not too pretty yet, but there's something about the community process, working together, getting along, dealing with each other, not always liking each other, but working through those things that we become who we're supposed to be. When Jesus disciples, he uses community. In the very beginning of developing his disciples, he built them into a community. How do we build those? How did he gather that community? Number one, through preaching. John the Baptist declared through a preached message that Jesus was the Lamb of God, the Spirit baptizer, and the Christ. When Andrew heard it, he responded. He responded to the sermon of John the Baptist. Many times God uses the sermons, what the Bible calls the foolishness of preaching, to draw people to his truth. There's something powerful about an anointed, prophetically anointed, preached sermon that draws people. But that's not the only way God does it. It's not the only way he pulls together his disciples. Sometimes it's like Andrew to Peter. Peter wasn't there for the sermon, but Andrew went and found Peter, and he told Peter what Jesus had done for him. He told Peter what John had preached. He shared his own experience, and Peter too became a follower. Some people become followers not because someone preached, but because someone they knew became a follower and had impact on their life. And then third, we see the personal invitation when he invited Philip. Later, Nathanael would be invited by Philip, but Jesus invited Philip. How did you come to know Jesus? Was it a personal thing going on in you privately between you and him, the way it was between him and Philip? Was it a friend that told you about the Lord and brought you forward? Or was it a sermon that was so dynamic, God used it in a way to draw you into his kingdom? Either way, if you've become his disciples, then you need to be a part of his disciple making and gathering process. I ask you to ask this question. How has God used you to gather other disciples? Has God used you to touch another friend, to tell somebody? In this moment in our history, in this nation, there are people who are looking for peace and direction and trying to understand what's going on. Is it possible that there's someone right now that God would put on your heart that could use a phone call and let you tell them what God has done for you? Maybe this is not just about you and I becoming more in his image, being a better follower and a better imitator. Maybe it's also about us being a gatherer of other disciples. I pray the Lord will use you today and that this word will be a blessing to you for days to come. God bless you. See you in the morning.